Hello, this is Howard Dotson. This is my podcast, Justice for All. Tonight we're talking about the plight of the Palestinian refugees. The UN estimates there are 14 million Palestinians. 5.3 million live in the West Bank and Gaza. There's 5.2 million Israelis in the state of Israel. In the West Bank, there's 3.19 million Palestinians in the West Bank. 1.25 million Palestinians. In 1948, the Nakba, the catastrophe, happened when the state of Israel was created by the UN. 750,000 Palestinians were displaced. Resolution 181, otherwise known as the British Mandate, began the occupation of Palestine. 1.8 million Palestinians need assistance from the UN. In 2018, President Trump cut the funding for the UN program supporting the Palestinians. %53 of Palestinians live in poverty. 1.5 million in Gaza, 900,000 in the West Bank. There's refugees all over the Middle East, 2.2 million in Jordan, almost 500,000 in Lebanon, and over 500,000 in Syria. The poverty rate for Palestinians is above 36%. 2 million Palestinians live with food insecurity. Palestinians have a right of return. All those refugees who have been waiting for 53 years, holding the keys to the homes that they left after the Nakba. On the line with me is Ramy Hamoudi. He's a Palestinian refugee who grew up in Beirut. When I'm in Beirut working with Syrian refugees, he's my interpreter. In a little while, I'm going to share Ramy's story of the Trump administration and the Muslim ban, and him being denied the visa to go to Iowa to marry his fiancée, Kathleen. Ramy, would you like to say something?
Yeah, good evening, Howie. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for hosting me on this video call. I really appreciate it. And I would love really to thank you very much for standing up for my cause and trying to help me and help all the Palestinians and Syrian refugees in Lebanon. You know, Howie, you've been in Lebanon several times, and you saw the situation that we're living. And despite everything, we don't want to go to the point that we have minimum civil rights in Lebanon, blah, 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 blah. We are banned to work 71 type of jobs. In 2015, I met with my ex-fiancée, Kathleen Manley, super amazing lady from California. And then this relationship developed, and until she visited me in Lebanon, and we got engaged, and we made our engagement at my parents' house, and we started processing my fiancé visa in the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon, and we fulfilled all the requirements, and she sent all the needed papers from the affidavit report, blah, 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 blah. And I had like 2 interviews in the embassy, in the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon. Last interview, they took my passport and they gave me a card and they said and they kept my passport in the embassy, and I was instructed to come back in 10 days to give them this card and receive my passport. And when they keep your passport in the, usually when they keep your passport in the embassy and they give you this card and ask you to come back in 10 days, this is like 80 to 90% visa. So I came back after 10 days. I gave them the card, and then like they searched for my passport and they gave it back to me. And they said your visa has been delayed for some administrative process. I wondered, like, what are those process? What are those administrative process? Then they kept me waiting for almost a year, between 9 months and a year. And Kathleen, my fiancée, tried to call the embassy, tried to did all her best to talk to the officer who is responsible for my case number in the embassy. She even sent some emails and she called them and she came to Lebanon and they didn't. She didn't get any result. After that, like I traveled to Nigeria, Lagos, Victoria Island. I had a job offer there as a restaurant manager. And then I saw that the US Embassy called me on my Lebanese number. So I called them from a Nigerian number. And they told me that there's a letter from me that I have to pick up from the gate. And I told them that I'm out of Lebanon now. They told me you can send any of your close blood family members to pick up the letter, like your father, your mother, your brother, or your sister. So I directed my brother Ryan. He went and he picked up this letter and he stamped it and he sent it to me via WhatsApp. And it says, "Dear Mr. Hamoudi, we regret to tell you that you are eligible for the immigration visa to the United States of America under the section 212A3B." Like how it was the first time that I read or I see this code. So when I went on Google, I Googled it and like I was shocked and surprised. It says that I am a terrorist and I am affiliated with a terrorist group and I have the potential to fund terrorism action. Now, that was the most sad and funny part. Like, I am funding a terrorism action and I can't understand how for a man with a $700 incoming when I used to live in Lebanon back then, how can I be able to fund terrorism action with $700? And Lebanon is a very, very, very freaking expensive country. So I called Kathleen and Kathleen hired a lawyer and my lawyer tried to call several times. And she called the embassy and every time when she gives them my case number, they hang up on her until like we tried to fight it for a long time. And we were reaching to an end that there is no way to retreat. Like we're not gonna change this. So I was like, okay, I am Palestinian. I witnessed all the war in Lebanon. I witnessed the Israeli invasion to Lebanon, the Syrian invasion to Lebanon, and everything. And because of my zip code, I was labeled as a terrorist. First, because I am Palestinian. Second, I'm Arab. And third, because I am Muslim. Now, I don't want to throw accusations on the administration or anyone. Like, I'm not pointing fingers, but I've witnessed several cases like my case, and that was a big shame. Like, usually we run to those countries for democracy, and we have learned that this country, this is where you can go and live in peace and love without any discrimination, where you can find the freedom of speech, etc., etc., etc. And I was surprised, like I was labeled as a terrorist. My attorney told them, like, you need to prove it. What if I was like representing a real terrorist? What is your proof? She never got an answer from them. After that, like when you tried to help me, like me and Kathleen, we got really sick and tired of it. We had to put our engagement. Unfortunately, we had to
just 1 second.
our engagement.
Thank you for visiting. 1 second, the PA is over. Go ahead.
All right. Me and Kathleen, at the end of the road, like we had to break our engagement, and we did not know that if we got married, this thing can be changed. I don't know. We wasn't certain about it. and we knew this very late. Like we broke our engagement, and after breaking the engagement with Kathleen, the U.S. Embassy called me back, and the woman who called me from the embassy, she's like, "Hello, Mr. Hamoudi, this is the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon." I was like, "Yes, how can I help you?" She's like, "We want to ask, are you still engaged to Miss Kathleen Manley?" I said, "No, we're not engaged anymore because, like, we tried to fix the situation. We tried to fight the accusation from the embassy, and it was always a dead end for us. So we're not engaged anymore because we're really tired." And then she, "Thank you, this is what I wanted to know," and she hung up. That's it. So this is my story. I'm a person who lived.
In 2000.
I did not even live. Hello?
Go ahead.
Yeah, like me and my brothers, we were lucky, like we did not live in the Palestinian camps. We lived in a very, very, very beautiful, high-class area in Beirut. It's called Kuraitan. This is where Mr. Rafiq al-Hariri, the former prime minister, the former Lebanese prime minister lived. It's a very, very, very high-end area, beautiful place, a very wealthy area, and we never got engaged or involved with any of the Lebanese parties. Yeah, we were a step away from everyone because we knew them all, but we were never a part against another part in the Lebanese chaos that was happening back then. And we were very lucky, like in the same building where we lived in Croydon, our neighbors was the Japanese ambassador, the Canadian ambassador, just Manhattan bank manager in Lebanon, and Albert Abella, general manager for Albert Abella Catering International Company. So there was no time to get involved in the chaos that was running around in the streets back then in Lebanon. Like we took care of our education, and we were super picky how to pick our good friends, educated people. And at the end of the day, like when I decided to leave Lebanon at the age of, I don't know, 46 years old, because I really loved the country that really welcomed me and hugged me. But at the end of the road, I want to start building my future with a woman that I love and start a family. And I was shocked that I was labeled as a terrorist in the US Embassy. And by the way, this resolution from the embassy, or this decision, destroyed my life for the coming 20, 30 years. Now I am stuck here. I cannot apply for any visa in the world, because of course when I go and I apply for a visa, they will ask me, "Have you ever applied to any other visa and got denied?" I cannot lie. I will say the truth. I have to tell them that I applied for the US visa, and sorry, my visa got declined and refused because they labeled me as a terrorist. Do you think they will give me a visa after hearing that?
No.
No. So really, that thing destroyed my life, my future, my career. By the way, I work in the hospitality career. I'm a musician, I'm a songwriter, and I cannot do anything here in Lebanon because of the situation that the US Embassy made. So, in making a long story short, that was my story, Howie. And you know the details about it.
And I'm asking for a Senate hearing in foreign relations, restorative justice for all the Muslims who were denied compassion and common sense for 4 years under the Trump administration. And so hopefully with that hearing, we'll get your testimony, and President Biden will do right and provide temporary protective status for the Syrian refugees and revisit your case with the State Department.
Thank you, Howie. And by the way, like when me and Kathleen, we were preparing for our wedding in the States, like I'm proud to say as a Muslim, I was going to a Christian marriage. And that proves that as a Muslim, as a Palestinian Muslim who was born and lived and raised up all his life in Lebanon, we never differentiate Like you can see me every Sunday with my Christian fellows here in Lebanon in the church, and they visit me in my home and they eat with me in Ramadan. So, I would really love to sleep and wake up in the next day and see peace and love conquer in the world.
Can you share your story that
That's
you
it.
shared with me about the priest who helped out the Muslims during Ramadan?
Oh yeah, of course, of course. Actually, I feel really proud to speak about this story again. And I heard the story from my grandfather who passed away in Lebanon in 1983, and he was like 107 years old when he passed away.
Wow.
My village in Lebanon, in Palestine, it's in Accra. We call it in Arabic Akka, and we came exactly from Al Galili mountain. Jabal Al Jalil mountain. My village name is Sahmata. Now, our village Sahmata was divided between Muslims and Christians. I don't mean like divided, it was like a certain sectarianity. No, it was a mixture between Muslims and Christians. And because in this village, the amount of the Muslims was like bigger than the amount of the Christians, like Christians in our village were a minority and Muslims was a majority. The what do you call it in English? The mayor in our village was a Christian and everyone loved him. His name is Ishaq Saman, Isaac Saman. And one night, the Muslims at dawn, every day at dawn, they call for prayers. They do it 5 days a time, 5 times a day, sorry. And one night, the priest realized in our village that Hajj Abu Hussein, like the sheikh, the imam of the mosque, he did not wake up to call people to do the call for the prayers, for the early morning, the dawn prayers. And he's late. There is something wrong. I'm going to give him like 2 to 3 minutes. If I don't hear his voice from the mosque coming like Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, this is the way how they call for the prayers. To wake up the people to pray, I'm going to take an action. And really, and the priest, by the way, he was the brother of Isaac Saman, the mayor. He was the brother of the mayor. He was the mayor's brother. So after 2 or 3 minutes, he was certain that there was something wrong with Hajj Hussein. So he opened the church and he started jingling the bells. He rang the bells of the church to wake up his Muslims brothers to do the early dawn prayers. And if this story tells us something, it tells us how people lived in love and peace and forgiveness among each other. And I'm so proud that I came from this village. My roots goes back to this village.
It's a beautiful Ramadan story.
Yeah, it is. God is beautiful. God threw love and peace in everyone's heart. So that's what I hope one day. It's just a wishful thought, just to sleep and wake up and see everyone is living just in peace and love.
One issue that I think we should address is the massacre in Shatila and Sabra, and how the average American has no clue what happened in the refugee camps in Beirut.
Actually, it was a huge rumble. After the PLO withdrew out of Lebanon, because they signed a certain agreement, like they need to leave Lebanon, and they leave to Tunisia in Africa. It's in Tunisia and Algeria, and even those countries are next to each other: Libya, Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco. So they left to Morocco, and the agreement said like we don't want any weapons in the Palestinian camps, like no military Palestinian forces are allowed anymore. And the Palestinians, Yasser Arafat agreed on that, and they signed an agreement with all the parties, with all the Lebanese parties and the Israeli government back then. And after the Palestinians militias left out of Lebanon, one night they put those two Palestinian camps under siege, Sabra and Shatila, and it was a Lebanese militia called the Lebanese forces. Back then, they used to call them the Phalanges, Al-Qatar, Arabic, and of course it was monitored and observed by the Israelis. And they went into those two camps and they started killing everyone with a white weapon. White weapon is like a knife or a sword, or this axe that you cut the tree with. That's how they started killing everyone: pregnant women, old people, old men, old women, youth, grown-up men, kids, babies. They killed everyone, and it was around 500,000 point something lost their lives between Lebanese and Palestinians and Syrians and Sudanese and Algerians. And they were all like refugees in Lebanon, you know, because Lebanon back then was like the country, it was a free country among those all Arab countries. But like the majority of the victims were Palestinians. They were like the Israeli, they threw like bombs in the air just to give lightnings, to give light for the Phalanges militia inside the camps, because like they cut off electricity. There was no power, there was no lights. So they started to light the camps for them through those bombs. They throw it in the air and it gives lights. I don't know what you call it in English.
Yeah.
And they committed this shameful thing and they killed everyone, and no one survived from separation. People who survived, like at the beginning, before they like do like a complete siege, people who ran away, they started watching from a close distance what was happening. And this happened because Palestinians didn't have weapons to defend themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they killed only civilians, by the way, like because the fighters, they left due to the agreement that they signed with the Israeli party.
So that war crime went all the way to the UN, and they found that Ariel Sharon, who was a commander then, shared responsibility for that war crime. But he still became prime minister of Israel. And when he was prime minister, he was granted immunity. And I understand that Palestinians every year commemorate and remember what happened in those camps.
Yeah. It happened on the 16th, September 16th, 1982.
Yeah.
And it lasts for 3 days in a row. Unbelievable, like that night, like it was a horrible night. And like, what was the prime minister back then? Actually, no, he was the military leader who...
Ariel Sharon.
Ariel Sharon, yeah, he passed away. And like, he's not condemned with anything. Like they never apply any of the UN resolutions on the Israeli part. I don't know why. And like even the Israelis, they did a committee. They called it like Kahan committee by the Israeli government in the High Court to investigate what happened. And they called it Kahan committee because like it was held by Isaac Kahan. He was the chief of the High Court. And he led the investigation personally. And that was happening, like they held this court on the 7th of February, 1983. And they put all the responsibility on Ariel Sharon's shoulders. But like, no one touched him. And also they blamed on Begin. He was like the prime minister, and Isaac Shamir, and Raphael Netan, but like no one, those people are untouchable, you know. Anything that goes against them, they...
Sorry.
Hello?
Yeah, another PSA.
Sorry. Like the thing is, like every time you want to object on something, they start throwing in your face this accusation: anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic. And what about us? We are Semitic too.
Yeah.
We are Semitic people. Yeah, like
Good point.
we cannot shoot ourselves in the leg. I mean,
So
and they lied about like there was 1,500 armed men inside those camps. We want to take them out. If there was 1,500 soldier in those camps, they would never dare to do this massacre.
Yeah.
Because there would be a resistance. There will be like casualties, but not like around 5,000 persons.
So at the UN, I think we need to revisit that massacre and the ICC that didn't have jurisdiction. They can't retroactively prosecute. But I think in addition to the Muslim ban, the global community needs to acknowledge this war crime and call for justice for those victims and the survivors.
I hope they get justice. The thing is, like, let me tell you this fast story. One time I was in a debate with a person from Ireland, and he's like, Ramy, I want to ask you a question. I was like, what? Go ahead. He's like, what would you do if you see like a little Israeli child who's crying in the street, his parents are dead? Would you kill him? I was like, no. I will hug him, I will hold him, I will take him. There's no one responsible for him. I will raise him up the right way. I will never force him to be a Muslim or a Christian. I will tell him who's his parents. I will tell him what is his religion, blah, 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 blah. But I will treat him with all the love of the world. Oops, that's a kid. And he's innocent and he has nothing to do with what his parents did or what his ancestors did to my people. You know what I mean, Howie?
Yep.
I mean, like one time I was in Dubai, and then I was sitting in a coffee shop with friends. Then like we were talking, random and shuffle things. We're jumping from a topic to another. We're talking politics, we're talking history, we're talking Hollywood, we're talking, and then like we came to the Palestinian cause. And then after 20 minutes of like debating me and my friends and talking and laughing, there was a man sitting aside. He stood up and he came to me and he's like, hey, listen, if I said my opinion, do you promise me that you won't hurt me? Do you promise me that I am safe? I was like, well, I'm not, you're not in danger. I'm not like, I'm not a threat to you. Just say your opinion. Like you say your word, I say my word, and no harm happens. It's like, I'm Israeli, and I'm spreading my hand to shake you, to shake hand with you. You want to shake hands with me? I was like, I can shake hands with a Jewish, but not with Israeli until you recognize my fault and you apologize for all what you have done. It's like, well, I did something also. Your people did something also. I was like, give me 2 minutes because I want to go out across the road. I have a friend who's sitting outside on the other side of the road in another coffee shop, and he's a German person, and his grandfather fought with the Nazis who killed your people and who took them to the Auschwitz, who burned them alive. And I am sorry for this, because that was something awful. And you know what? He loves Hitler and he loves his grandfather and he hates your people. I'm gonna bring him and he will spread his hand to you and he will ask you to shake hands with him. Are you ready for that? He's like, no, never. I was like,
Wow.
well, eyes on me. Because for me, your government and your army are exactly they did to my people as the Nazis. Treated us the same way. I'm sorry for all the innocent souls that was lost in the Holocaust. I'm really sorry, and I go in sympathy with you. But you treated us exactly the same way the Nazis treated you. And he was, you know what? When I spoke out this truth, he was speechless. He didn't say any word. So how we don't hate anyone, just want our rights. And when I decided to leave Lebanon and go and live in peace with the woman, the only woman that I loved And I owe her a lot. It didn't happen, and I was accused of terrorism.
The absurdity of that is that using that zip code logic, they would have to say that every African American in North Minneapolis is a gang member.
Oh, this is something
That's how
awful.
sloppy
You
they
can't
were in those 4 years.
consider or ethnicity or religion. My God, this is awful. Yeah, the Israelis killed my people, but not all the Jews are Israelis.
Yep.
I cannot call a bad person who killed people, even if he was Christian, I cannot blame it on all the Christians in the world. If any Muslim terrorist, radically fundamentalist person who embraced Islam as a religion killed people, I cannot blame all the Muslims for that.
Yep.
We need to learn how to differentiate between a good Muslim and a bad Muslim, a good Christian and a bad Christian, a good Jewish and a bad Jewish. We cannot generalize and apply everything on everyone, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
Sorry, my
Yep.
English is
No,
not
you're fine.
long.
So one of the ironies I think that needs to be lifted up is that in 1946, the King David Hotel was bombed by Jewish Zionists. They bombed that hotel because that's where the British mandate was offered.
Yeah, the Jews did it.
Yeah. So when you're an occupied people and you want freedom and you don't have the political venues to bring about that change, and you've been occupied for 53 years, it's not unrealistic to anticipate political violence. I'm not condoning terrorism, but if we don't find a path for Palestine to have its own state and give a way for Palestinians to return, you know what's going to happen. So today, I learned that Al-Aqsa Mosque was raided again by Israeli forces during Ramadan. Those provocative actions are increasing the odds of another intifada, which will result in more Palestinian civilians being killed, disproportionate to Israeli casualties. And my friend, Yitzhak Ryder, is a professor at Hebrew University. And he actually advised 3 Israeli prime ministers. And when he was advising those prime ministers, he said the UN should take over these holy sites. They should be managed by blue helmets. So neither side can provoke the other one to get into political violence. So Netanyahu is using, remember the movie Wag the Dog with Robert De Niro?
Of course, I love this movie. Wow.
It's a Wag the Dog moment. He's in crisis because he tried to take away the independent judiciary. He was doing that because the Supreme Court knows international law, and they know that expanding the settlement violates international law. A lot of people think it's about his legal jeopardy because of his own issues, when in reality, they want a Supreme Court that's pliable so they can continue the settlement. 750,000 Israeli citizens have representation in the Knesset who live in those settlements. That's his political base.
Yeah, so they always create a problem, and they cry out, "We're victims," in order to gain the international community sympathy and support. And this and they did this, and like when they blew up this hotel, King's David Hotel, because like they were they had an argument with the British back then, and then like they blew up this hotel. Unbelievable. And then they go to cry out, they are killing us because we are a minority and this is anti-Semitism, blah, 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 blah. And they start crying as victims, and they are not victims. They are attacking everyone. I don't know. Do you know the story about this American warship? they bombed back in the 60s.
Yes. Say more about it.
And they knew it was. They knew it was like an American warship, and they didn't back off.
So the settlement expansion reaches a point where there's not a viable two-state solution. It's reaching a point where it looks like ethnic cleansing, because the Palestinians are forced to live in urban areas. 61% of the occupied territory is areas where Palestinians are not allowed to live. They're all forced into urban areas.
Like even if you go to walk down, they divided the road. Like this is where you walk, and this is where we walk.
Sounds like apartheid.
You know? Yeah, this is apartheid. Like, and the sidewalk where it's like, which is like for the Israelis, it's like really nice, neat, beautiful, and clean. And the Palestinian side is like, oh my God, it's sands and muds and not clean and nothing to get off, and there's no sewage. And
It makes me wonder if they're making things so miserable they'll leave.
the thing is, no one want for the Jews to leave.
No, not the Jews to
They
leave, for
are-
the Palestinians. That
Yeah.
scorched earth strategy, make it so miserable that the Palestinians will choose to go to one of the camps instead of staying in the occupied territory.
Very true, very true. It's like just let them live in misery and below the line of poverty, and they will move. They will sell their lands, their houses, blah blah blah, and they are taking over their houses.
We see what's
So
happening in East
unbelievable.
Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Can you speak to President Trump's decision to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem? And how that impacted Palestinian
Even like
community?
during the war between Lebanon and Israel, the last war in 2006, the Israeli administration offered on the American administration to move the AUB, the American University of Beirut, from Beirut to Tel Aviv.
Wow.
Like, like the AUB is not shooting off. The AUB is not launching missiles on you. So why do you want to move it from Beirut to Tel Aviv? They don't want us to have anything, Howie.
Yeah.
All what we need is love and peace.
Amen.
And as I mentioned before, no one want them to leave because they lived in this land for thousands of years. But that does not justify for them to take over the land and say it is our land only, and there was nothing called Palestine. Go to the Bible. You will read the word Palestinians. For God's sake, if I have to follow the promise there, they were promised this land, and they are relying on a religious, strong story to take over this land. Okay, the Muslims can go now to Europe, and especially to Spain. And they called it back then Andalusia, Andalusia, Al-Andalus. And they can't stop evacuating the country and the areas and the villages, claiming that it's their promised land, and because their Muslim ancestors lived in this country for hundreds of years, thousands of years ago. The Muslims, would this like justify for the Muslims that Spain and Europe are for them? No. You cannot rely on a story in your book that says, we promised you this land, and now, okay, go and kill everyone, kick them out, evacuate the areas, kill the big and the small, throw them out because God promised you this land. The Muslims can do the same. They can go to Europe, take over the areas and countries and evacuate all the countries, claiming that our ancestors lived here.
Mm,
That was during, I'm talking about the Islamic
Spanish Moors,
Khilafah.
yeah.
Yeah, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
No, this is wrong. This is wrong. What is religion? Religion holds all the meanings of love, beauty, and peace. You cannot
Amen.
take the religion as an excuse to hate others. I would never allow for my own belief to be a center of hatred towards others. You have your own belief that I respect. I have my own belief, and that's it.
Yep.
Let's go to the let's focus on the humanitarian side. You are a human being. I am a human being. We are sharing this planet. Let's help each other, brother.
Amen.
You're sick, I can help you. You're in trouble, I can help you. You're in a problem, I can help you. And it's a vice versa thing. When we reach and hit this level of love and understanding for others, then peace will be like, we'll conquer the world. Amen for that.
You need to preach. We need to get you in a pulpit.
Those words are coming out from the heart.
Oh yeah.
Because we have been saying this for years and years, and no one is listening. They're refusing to listen to us.
Yeah.
And at the end of the road, I was labeled as a terrorist.
Such an injustice.
Yes.
And so I want to ask the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, how many Ramis are out there? How many Muslims have been mistreated by that policy? And what are we doing to right that wrong? And so I mean, I don't separate Syrians from Palestinians. They're all children, innocent, who deserve a bright future. So I want to appreciate your time, and I'm going to put this on YouTube as part of the podcast, Justice for All, lifting up the plight of the Palestinians. I want to see our funding for Israel be contingent on the settlement stopping and for there to be a viable Palestinian state. That's the only path to peace.
My last words, I want to thank you for all the efforts that you are investing in, you and all the team. And I have a final request. Please, if you cannot help me with my cause, please help those kids.
Amen.
Those kids, if they grow up, they will be members in ISIS or God only knows where.
Yep.
They are still innocent. They're jumping in the streets. They're begging money. You ask them for help. They rush to help you. They are living in poverty, and you can see them not stop smiling. They never stop smiling. They are full of love, and they have lots of potential. Let's embrace them. Let's give them a new world, new life. Help them out. Please help.
I shared Charlie Wilson's war video with the senators.
Oh my God, they refused, like they gave him money and trillions of money for war, and when he asked for like $1 million or $2 million, I don't know how much for education, they declined. What a big irony.
Yeah. And that resulted in the Taliban, which was 20 years of war. Exactly. 1 million versus the trillions we spent in 20 years of war.
Yeah. Well, those kids in the streets, they are a project if we don't take care of them.
Yep.
Thank you for everything, Howie. God bless you.
God bless you.
God bless the country, gave us people like you.
Blessings and Ramadan Mubarak.
Thank you, Howie. And I know it's a bit late. I don't know if it's late in your agenda, but happy Sunday, Palm, or Palm Sunday. I hope so.
Blessings. Thank you.
Thank you, Howie. Good night.
Good night, brother.
Bye-bye. Good night, brother. Bye-bye.